This is Pod Populi.
Podcast for the people.
Hi, I'm Dorothy. Are you ready to dive deep into one of the bougiest zip codes in the country? The good, the bad, the ups and downs, the real and the not so real. This is That Greenwich Life. This episode is brought to you by Steam. Steam has been on Greenwich Avenue for years, but I bet you didn't know that about a year ago, the same team heading up legendary chef Peter Chang's Washington, D.C. restaurants took over at Steam. And now they're serving up authentic, fresh, homemade dim sum, noodles, rice dishes, and more. Their offerings are healthy and so much more than your typical Chinese food takeout or delivery. So visit steamgreenwich.com today and go ahead and give yourself the night off for making dinner. Hello, beautiful people, and welcome back to another episode of That Greenwich Life. I'm your host, Dorothy Cascerceri, Simone, and thank you for listening and tuning in another week. Whew. Guys, I am coming into the studio hot this morning. I was at an event last night. This event, I've been to many, many events. You all know if you've been tuning in, I used to be a celebrity journalist, a celebrity reporter. I worked for People Magazine, Life and Style, In Touch Weekly. I've been to a lot of events. I've been on a lot of red carpets. I've interviewed everyone from Jen Aniston on a red carpet to Mariah Carey. Lots of stories to come about all that. But I was asked by Ashley Rodon, who is married to Yankees pitcher Carlos Rodon, if I would come and attend the first annual Willow Gala here in Greenwich at the Delamar Hotel. And she asked me if I would come and I would be on the blue carpet, which is the red carpet, but it's blue for the Yankees. And if I would come and just interview some of the players who are going to be attending and some of the sponsors and just kind of gather some in-house assets for the foundation, the Carlos Rodon Foundation. And I did not hesitate because when I met Ashley, and she told me all about the Willow Grant and the upcoming Willow Gala, it was a cause so near and dear to my heart. And if you have been tuning in for this, the life of this whole show, really, or even just if you've tuned into one episode, you know probably that I went through a very, very traumatic 21-week pregnancy loss, followed by a riddle of infertility, 5 unsuccessful IVF rounds, 2 IVF miscarriages, 1 natural miscarriage. Guys, this was the nightmare of all nightmares. And if you have never been touched by infertility and pregnancy loss and all of those things, actually, I'm not even going to say that because I really do think that everybody listening has been touched in some way, even if it's not your journey, by somebody that you know and love who has gone through this momentous mountain to climb in trying to have their first baby or their second or third or fifth. And so when Ashley Rodon told me about the Willow Grant, she and Carlos went through their own difficult struggle, and they started the Willow Grant, named after their daughter Willow, who is their rainbow baby. I also, thank God, I don't know how, from some stroke of luck, I don't know what I did in my past lives to deserve it, but I have a rainbow baby as well, my 18-month-old daughter, Gemma, and I also have a son who's 8. And they named it after their daughter, Willow, and they raise money and work with different foundations to provide grants to families who are struggling to build their family or grow their family, because IVF is expensive and not a lot of people have access to it. And we were very fortunate that we had access to it. We were not very fortunate that it did not work for us 5 rounds. And also the fact that it led me into a spiral of depression, anxiety, and I was even diagnosed with PTSD, but we still were lucky enough to have the opportunity to do it. So last night I was at this gala and the timing could not be better for this episode and for this guest who is sitting here in the Pod Populi Greenwich, Connecticut studios waiting so patiently for her introduction because last night at the event, I definitely cried. I say I cried 19 times. It was probably only 4, but I still, after all this time, even after having my rainbow baby, listening to Ashley Rodon speak about her journey, which I already knew the whole story, but just hearing her talk about it and hearing some of actually the keynote speaker was a doctor from Columbia who, man, I really wish that I knew this person back when I was going through it. The whole time I just kept thinking, Dr. Paula Brady at Columbia, she gave the keynote speech. I was blown away by her speech, by her own personal story. And I wished that I knew somebody like her that actually was a reproductive endocrinologist who could help me during my journey, because I got, slapped around by the medical system. I did my IVF at Cornell. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. I had a horrible experience. I was nothing but a number. I was nothing but just cattle in a huge field of, I was like at a meat market. And when they always say, like in the makeup industry, there's no testing on this brand does no testing on animals, animal cruelty. This is how I felt, you guys. I felt like I was a lab rat. And this beautiful guest that is here that I'm going to introduce in just a second. I talk too much. This is the problem. This person has dedicated her career to helping people, particularly women, navigate the very broken down medical system and some of these places where, healthcare is a business and where women especially, are not given the empathy and the compassion and the true love that they deserve. And this person helped me tremendously throughout my very difficult journey. She was one of the first doctors that I was connected with. We developed a lifelong friendship and relationship, and I respect her so much. I look up to her so much, and I am so honored and ecstatic to have her here in the studio, especially literally the morning after being at this event, which brought back so many memories for my own experiences. Anyway, without further ado, but I'm already 7 minutes into the show. Please, everybody, welcome my friend, Dr. Tracy Shevell, to the show. I'm going to just give you a really quick rundown about Tracy, just so that you know this is not just like your average typical doctor, like, oh, I had a great experience with her, I'm going to bring her on. Tracy, welcome to the show, by the way.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here.
I love that you're here. Okay, Tracy Shevell is a high-risk OBGYN who dedicated the first half of her career to caring for the most complex of situations to ensure the best outcomes for mother and baby. When the medical system began to get sick, yes, she realized empowering women to own their well-being in body, mind, and soul was a chance to bring healing to more women than she had ever dreamed possible. I am definitely one of them, you guys. You can find her on Instagram at Tracy Shevell MD every single day. And by the way, her Instagram content, it's everything that you want to know about. Do not go to WebMD ever again if you ever have a symptom or anything. If your child has a symptom, do not Dr. Google. Just go on Instagram and follow Dr. Shevell at Tracy Shevell MD, and you will literally find out anything that you need to find out. And you can expect a book that will change the way women view their own power within the upcoming year. And I have been able to preview some of this book. I'm actually in the book. Yep. And so Tracy sent me the excerpt about what she wrote about my story and my experience. She is a beautiful writer. She is an absolute healer. She is more than a doctor. She is a healer. And that Greenwich Life, the show, is all about healing. So anyway, Tracy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. That was so beautiful. I'm really just sitting here trying not to cry, but we'll make it through. We'll make it through. So I met you about 5 years ago. And at the time you were working in a hospital. Yep. You were a high-risk perinatologist. You were seeing women that had very complicated situations like my own, very traumatic loss. And you decided to walk away from all of that and go out on your own. And it is the best decision that you've ever made. So tell us a little bit about that first and give us some sense of that journey for you. Of course. So first of all, I'm thrilled to be here. I love what you've built. I'm very flattered, and I'm very excited to just have this conversation with you.
I adore you.
Me too. So I really was very classically trained. I did my training in the city. I was a very idealistic medical student and resident, and I loved what I was doing. And I worked at a hospital in Connecticut, Stanford Hospital, and
That's where Gemma was born, actually,
I
my
know.
rainbow baby.
That's right.
So it's like a really special place.
Yeah, for me as well. I was there for 17 years, and really for the first 8 to 10 years, it was the perfect job. Literally the perfect job. I had medical students, I had residents, I got to see patients who had a physician that they cared about and for. And I would see them for the complications, and I would take them through the difficult things. But my help, my care was additive. They would take my counsel and go back to their doctor and cry in their doctor's office. And then things started to change. And I started to see women who were, you talk about being part of a cattle field. I started to see women who I would walk in the room and I would give them the devastating news that the 6-week heartbeat wasn't there, which is a profound, profound loss. It's a loss of hope, actually.
That's right.
And they wouldn't know who to call. I would say to them, well, who's your doctor? You have to call your doctor and get scheduled to, have the next steps. And she would say to me, I have to call a call center. I don't know who my doctor is.
Right.
And I found myself providing the care because I couldn't morally and ethically let that woman leave. I found myself providing the care for both their generalist and the specialist. And I was happy to do it, but I started to become essentially, it was real moral and ethical burnout. I knew my patients weren't getting the care they deserved. I couldn't spread myself any thinner than I was. I was giving everyone my phone number. I was talking to 1 million people a day. And as much as I wanted to continue to do that, it just wasn't, not only could I not do it, but the system was not serving women, and women were becoming not only, you mentioned PTSD, they were not only going through their own trauma, but they had trauma that then became theirs because of the system being completely unresponsive. I almost started to feel like I was the third party in an abusive marriage.
Right. Oh, that's powerful.
Yeah, no, it's true. And it wasn't that the doctors didn't care, because I know a lot of people want to blame the doctors, but it's not the doctor's fault. The doctors are overwhelmed. They're taking call with people they don't even know. They're trying to see 45 patients in a day to get a $2,000 bonus at the end of the year, so that they can pay their bills and their mortgage and their medical student loans.
The doctors are definitely stuck in the system too. I mean, if you're listening and you've gone through any type of health crisis, small or large, or you've witnessed a loved one going through it, you know that finding a good doctor is paramount to navigating it. Like, you're already navigating a ton of emotions and a ton of confusion, and then having to figure out, which doctor is going to help you, and then trying to figure out, like, at which hospital, like, who's the right person. And the doctors, I always felt like for everything that I went through with IVF, I don't blame the doctors. I blame their employers. I blame the business. I blame the system.
That's right.
I understand that it has to be a business. It's, healthcare is not, it's a for-profit business. But if you have gone through anything where you're trying to figure out, like, how do I solve this health problem? You know that somebody like Dr. Shevell is invaluable, but a person like Dr. Shevell is only human, right? You just couldn't give more and more and more and more.
And I did until until it just became obvious that there was some other solution that needed to happen. You couldn't just expect to hope to find a doctor who could give you, sort of everything you needed. And I began to sort of think about ways that could supplement care. What if we had patient advocates? What if every woman, when they sort of entered their first OBGYN appointment, was given someone who could help them navigate or teach them how to be their own coordinator? Because ultimately, the power is in our own hands as women. And ultimately, the medical system, because it is so patriarchal, disempowers women to realizing that they themselves have power to contribute to their own care, that they can do something as simple as keeping a notebook with all of their providers, and that they don't have to apologize for asking one more question.
Right.
That they are essentially a client of the big business.
Right.
And that doesn't make it easier necessarily, but that mindset has to come into the conversation. And so basically, I've always been a good girl. I've always been a rule follower. But when the pandemic came and I came home from work crying every day, I did something that I'd never done before in my life, and I quit.
This is like a confession. This is like a confessional in here.
Yeah.
And you quit.
I quit.
I remember this.
I quit.
I couldn't believe it.
I literally quit. And I literally had to swallow a Valium, make the phone call, because I'm still in that good girl mode. And I'm calling my chairman, who was a man at the time, and my voice is shaking and I'm afraid to get in trouble. And I'm putting air quotes around that. Mm-hmm. And I had to stand up for myself. And now I've learned so much in the healing process about boundaries and what I didn't know then. But I was terrified, but I knew it was not just for my own salvation, but I had to figure out a better way to move forward for all the women that I was entrusted with caring for.
And that's what you've done. I mean, taking that step, as scary as it was, you took it, and it was one of the best. It was the best thing you've ever done.
It was the best thing I've ever done.
And frankly, you helped yourself first and foremost, but forget about that. Put that aside for a hot second. It allowed you then to more effectively help more women than you were in that role.
Exactly. And I had been in this patriarchal system, this training system for so long that I never even thought about more expansive ways to help more people. Mm-hmm. I had my patients, and that's what I did. And I never thought, I assumed that the only way to do that was through public health. But we're in a different era now. Mm-hmm. We're finally open to having conversations about women's bodies being different, about women going through experiences like, perimenopause, menopause, that dramatically are ignored. We're finally acknowledging that women haven't been included in studies about drugs until a very short time ago.
Right.
And so, I had myself to sort of go on my own healing journey and look at my own constructs about healing and helping women before I really realized that there had to be a more comprehensive way. And for a short time during COVID, when everything was online, I quit really right before the pandemic. And I was going to take a job at another factory.
Factory.
Yep. And in some ways, the pandemic was the greatest gift I ever got, because it allowed the entire world to go online, to sort of rethink.
Yep. Pause, reset.
Correct.
Slow down.
And the biggest thing for me was that mental health went online.
Yes.
And when I saw that could happen and that could exist, and you could still meaningfully interact with people online, the whole world started to change in terms of how I started to think about things.
That's exactly right. Because it allowed more people, especially women. Women have so many constraints. We're taking care of our kids. We're working, a full-time job and taking care of our kids. And we're not able to always access the mental health help that we need. But the fact that it's online, you could hop on a Zoom when your baby is napping now,
Correct.
and really talk about your own mental health problems. And that, you're right, that's something that didn't exist before.
And for me too, it allowed me to start thinking, wow, maybe I could provide care to women in the most complex situations who don't have someone to hold their hand.
Right.
And so in 2021, I created and launched my own my third child at the time, working on the fourth, right? I only have 2 human children. But I launched this wonderful concierge, very small support network called Blue Moon Perinatal, where I worked with patients on the most profound losses, stillbirth and multiple losses and complex medical issues. And it allowed me to do everything. And I loved it. And
I wish that I knew you. I wish that I knew Blue Moon Perinatal. That's what it's called, right?
Yes.
I wish that I had that after I had my traumatic 21-week loss. We met shortly after that. But it was, it was already like, I wish that I knew you to help navigate that because what a riddle and what a nightmare to live in. And I had doctors and they were helpful, but not like what you offer women and families.
And I think that, what I learned from that is obviously having a high risk OBGYN to be your quarterback is terrific, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that. It could be someone else who's medically literate. And, part of what I did was just allow people to ask the darkest questions and give them time. But the next sort of evolution in the process for me was that Blue Moon Perinatal was a concierge practice. And it was really hard for me in a big picture it allowed me the luxury of being intimately connected with women who could afford to pay me. Mm-hmm. But what about all the women who couldn't?
Right. And you bring up a great question.
And I felt that this solution needed to be something that was scalable. And I didn't want to start an app, and I didn't want to start a business, an online course program, and be just another sort of moneymaker. I wanted to envision a new way of healing. Mm-hmm. And so, I forced myself to start thinking outside the box. I realized also that I missed being in the hospital. That while I feel old, I'm also very young in my career. So I missed that.
Such a part of who you are.
It's a huge part of who I am. So I learned to have the confidence in myself, even as a doctor. I didn't have the confidence in myself to think that I could reinvent, that I could change the world. Really, truly.
That's right.
Not just one person at a time, but in a bigger way. I wasn't given that confidence ever because I was a woman.
Isn't that that's a really powerful statement. And it's incredible that if you're listening and you're a woman, I mean, if you're a man too, you may feel this way, but I did this episode about imposter syndrome, episode 4, and it comes up so frequently. I feel like every single episode, I'm always saying, episode 4. It's true. But everybody on the brink of something incredible in their life and walking into an opportunity to really reset their journey has this exact experience where they feel like, I'm not good enough to do this. I don't have the confidence to do this. Why me? And we feel small.
That's right. And I think that especially when you're dealing with vulnerable medical issues, you're made to feel smaller.
That's right. Yep.
You're not, unfortunately, being allowed to have a voice. And you need a voice, and you need to believe in yourself, and you need to practice that in other areas of your life. And so I started honestly thinking bigger, and I started to think about how do you reach more people? Because ultimately there are things that I think are critical to a woman's being well. And I talk specifically about women. And if men are listening to this, obviously the same holds true for men. But the reality is that women and men are different. We do have different strengths, and we do have sort of different things that make us unique. There is a reason there is the divine feminine, and that term exists. Women were the first doctors. Women were the first healers.
Is that right?
Oh, yeah.
The first healers, I know for sure.
The first healers, midwives.
Yes.
Medicine women.
Yes, you're right.
They were considered to be witches if they didn't sort of get with the program. And it wasn't until the creation and the invention of Semmelweis's hand cleaning to prevent maternal sepsis in hospitals and the development of forceps that obstetrics went into the hands of men.
Oh,
it was originally women. So women have, I truly feel, an innate capacity to heal.
Yes, for sure.
And so part of what I want to bring to women, what I feel is so important that I did as part of, my everyday job in a hospital or at Blue Moon Perinatal, or even now, is realizing that women have to understand that their wellness is not just what happens in a doctor's office, but it's also about the emotional baggage that they carry, whether that's PTSD, whether that's a history of trauma as a childhood. And also that there is a spirituality innate to women that we have been sort of instructed not to tap into.
That's right. That's exactly right. I mean, I think definitely everything that you're doing, it's empowering women. And I feel like for people who are listening and they're in this situation, like I have so many people always saying to me, hey, do you know a really good general practitioner? I don't have a doctor. Do you have a good doctor? I don't have an answer. I don't really have a good general practitioner. The last time that I went to my general practitioner, again, it's not the doctor. I really loved her. But it's like the system. I had this horrific sinus infection and it was raging and I couldn't, I was trying to get in to see her and I just kept saying, can you just please call me in a Z-Pack? Like, please call me in a Z-Pack. And she couldn't, right? And I don't pretend to know what goes on being a doctor and what legally you can do and what legally you can't. But she insisted that I come in to see her. And Gemma, my daughter, was only, 6 months old or something at the time. And I was taking care of her and I didn't have any help. And then the doctor's office couldn't even see me. It was like a Thursday and the doctor's office couldn't even see me until Monday. They were booked all Thursday, all Friday. And then it was the weekend. And I'm walking around, every single step that I took, I felt like somebody was cracking me over the head with a hammer. I was in such a terrible amount of pain. And so I was really outraged by this. And the doctor just said, I'm really sorry. There's nothing I can do. I have to see you. And so finally I took myself over to urgent care, like walked in, could barely even see, blinded from the pain with my baby. Now I'm taking my baby into urgent care with all these sick people.
Totally.
Like, what option did I have? And so after that, I just kind of thought to myself, nothing against the doctor. I don't know the doctor's personal experience. I don't know what it means to be a doctor and what you can and cannot do. But I just knew that going to that doctor, going forward and going to that practice, that wasn't going to be the right thing for me.
Good for you.
Right?
Good for you.
And I think, and I have to tell you though, I think that you taught me a lot about this.
Thank you.
I think you really taught me, Tracy, a lot about how you have to advocate for yourself. And as much as you trust your doctor, although I don't have too much trust in doctors. I'm still very scarred from everything. But as much as you trust your doctor, you have to trust yourself more.
Correct.
And I remember when I was going through everything, and I call it a riddle because I had what is known as secondary unexplained infertility. That's a mouthful, but secondary would because I already had my son, Nicholas. He was 3.5 at the time. He's in 3rd grade now. And unexplained, man, I have a really big problem with this word. I have as much of a problem with the word unexplained as I do with the word infertility. But unexplained infertility is when nobody knows why you cannot get to the point of a live birth.
Correct.
And they're doing a million tests on you and your spouse and on your uterus and on your fallopian tubes and on your ovaries and on your everything, all the things. And nobody can figure it out. And I don't fault doctors for that because they are not God. But I did just hear Dr. Brian Levine at CCRM, who I know you know as well. I just did hear him speak on a panel saying something like, unexplained infertility is not a diagnosis.
Correct.
That means that the professionals have to dig deeper to understand what is going on with this woman, this couple, this family. And again, he's another person I wish I met a lot earlier in the practice. But talking about, barriers to healthcare, CCRM didn't accept our insurance. And so we would have had to pay out of pocket. And we had, United Healthcare. So it was it wasn't a very obscure insurance. But again, it's just, there's so many things. And I think for me, navigating the medical industry I talk about all these like secondary, like the secondary trauma of people not supporting you, family, friends who you think are your go-tos in life. I talked all about this in episode 18. So just, a couple weeks back. But like, that's a secondary trauma.
Grab your tissues.
Yes.
Bring your tissues.
Tissues. Exactly. Yeah. And then there's almost this like, third trauma, which is when you see somebody who is sick or has some kind of a health problem, or it's your own health crisis. And you are constantly talking to different doctors and sitting in different waiting rooms and being in different call centers, being like, knocked around. And it's like, you just don't even know where to turn. And so certainly what you do, and now you do it also for really everyone, right? Like your Instagram,
correct.
Like people can talk about social media and the negative things about it. And sure, there are a lot of things to be said in that conversation. But what you do on Instagram is you provide this very concierge feel to anyone. And they don't have to hire you. But people can. People can hire you if they're going through a really, certain medical crisis. And it's really anything.
That's right.
And you'll help them. You'll hold their hand.
I will. I mean, I'm like ultimately the ultimate hand holder.
Yes, you are. Oh my gosh. Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
I mean, that's my goal.
You answered every single one of my emails. You answered every single one of my calls. I mean, we didn't even really see each other in person really much at all.
I know.
And you were this angel mother for me during everything that I went through. So the fact that you do it for other people, it's incredible.
So you're bringing up a good, when I realized that this wasn't enough and helping 10 people a year wasn't going to be enough.
Right.
I very reluctantly, there's a lot of bad, to your point, on social media, but I realized that what I wanted to be able to truly be was a public figure to speak out about, to teach women how, all of my friends, we had a very similar experience. I'm your best friend that's a doctor, right? But what was I teaching people? I was teaching people silly things that they could understand, that they were just afraid of, because they've been programmed to believe they don't have the strength to do it. Anybody can go into CVS and pick up a bottle of Tylenol. The generic name is acetaminophen, and they can then understand with 5 names of 5 things how to navigate the aisle with 4,000 cold medicines. Mm-hmm. And that gives you strength, and that gives you power, and that may encourage you to ask a question, mm-hmm. to think that you can handle the information, and then you walk in with more power. And so,
that's right.
So I decided to really, instead of focusing on, trying to grow from 10 to 15 patients, I was encouraged by one of my closest friends in the world, who is a very well-known chef. She's like, get on Instagram.
Can you say who it is? I know who it is.
Yeah, Alex Guarnaschelli.
Yep.
Props to Alex.
Yep.
She said, just get on Instagram and just post every day. I'm like, oh, come on. She's like, and she, God bless her soul, she was like, get back on there, get on every day. She knew. And she said, it'll grow. I'm like, oh, no, it won't. And then
and now how many followers do you have?
I have 29,000 followers.
Yeah, 29,000 followers in a short period of time.
And honestly, I have to tell you, it was very awkward at first talking to the camera, but now I have all these followers who write me questions every day and that I'm close to. Yep. And I'm able to, people DM me. So I have office hours like 3 to 5 times a week. People will ask questions. They'll get their questions answered. I will message people directly. It's been so rewarding. And I think women are starting to understand not just the answers to medical questions, but I'm also being very transparent. I've gone through my own complex mystery illness. I have talked to channels. I have talked to psychics. I have talked to shamans. I have talked to therapists, and I've done some profound work myself.
The White Buffalo Woman. We talked about the White Buffalo Woman.
Oh yeah, went to her.
I'm going to do a whole episode, by the way, on the White Buffalo Woman. Oh. So just remember that name, Eve Kerwin. Just remember the name.
Oh, I can't wait to hear that one. She was amazing.
She's incredible.
But I think that, part of this is what I've learned. And I think we can't just preach, oh, you should go to therapy. I'm a physician. I had childhood trauma. I'm in therapy every freaking week, mm-hmm. and I'm going to be for the rest of my life.
Same, sister.
Yeah, and honestly, the world would be a better place if everyone was in therapy every week.
That's exactly right.
And
especially
I'm not
my husband.
Yeah.
Poor John. I always throw him under the bus, but I'm a truth teller, you know?
Exactly.
But also, so I'm looking at the clock. This is always the way that it goes. We're running out of time, but really quick, getting back to the Instagram thing.
Yes.
So just a reminder, if you want to follow Dr. Tracy Shevell, it's Tracy Shevell, Shevell. ELLMD on Instagram. And you talked about interacting with people. And also that's what I love too, especially when it comes to this show. I get so many messages from people in my DMs about how that Greenwich life has really impacted them. And so you guys can also talk with me on Instagram at Dorothy on TV. And also you can go onto my website, DorothyOnTV.com. And you can also, by the way, shop that Greenwich Life merch. We have a merch store. I don't know like how or why that happened. This is the imposter syndrome, but people wanted swag. And so the people asked, I answered.
Exactly.
So you can go onto the shop button on my page. And before we go, Tracy, just leave us with one last kind of thought. Okay. For anyone who's listening, who's dealing with a complex medical crisis, or it's their father or their mother or their best friend or their cousin, what would you say is the number one piece of information? I know this is a tough question, but what's the number one piece of information that they should keep in mind when they are they're navigating obviously this crisis, but navigating the medical system and finding the right doctors and the right care?
I think it's a 3-part answer. I think there's sorry, microphone.
That's okay.
I think there's one thing you can do personally that's your responsibility. And that is, and I think responsibility is important. I think you can make sure that you have one cohesive place where you have all your medical records or your loved one's medical records, that you have a notebook with this section is for the cardiologist, this section is for the nephrologist, this is this opinion, and really make sure, because that will help the doctors do their jobs better. The second
That's a great piece of advice, by the way. And also, I imagine it will help people organize their thoughts too when they're asking questions.
That's right.
Because when you go through a medical crisis, you're mentally not even really there. It's like I say, it's the same as planning a funeral and becoming an event director the second after a loved one dies.
Absolutely right.
How can you plan an event and a luncheon for 200 people and you're mourning the loss? So I think that's a great piece of advice.
It's key, because also the other thing is some doctors all doctors have different medical records, electronic medical records.
Oh God, yes.
So that's one very important piece that you yourself can actually do. The second piece is, do not forget that you are the client, and that the key sentence is to say to a doctor who's not listening to you, I know that you want to help me figure this out because we're on the same team. And if you can't, who do you think can?
Oh, I love that.
Yep.
I love that.
That's a really important piece. And number 3, don't be afraid to ask if there is a patient advocate or a patient supporter or a health advocate. They're so underused and they exist. And you can always look independently to try to hire your own. Have someone else help you be that quarterback that you really want to be.
Wow. Okay. That was the most incredible answer to that question. I really hope that if you're listening and you're going through anything like this, or in the future when something like this comes up, because we're all going to face health crises, we're all going to see others that we love face health crises. I hope that you remember these 3 steps. I definitely know that I will, because I don't think I had a real handle on this when I was going through it. But anyway, guys, we are so out of time. I'm sorry I kept everybody longer this week. I try to keep the episodes at 30 minutes because I know how busy everybody is. But this was just too good of a conversation. So anyway, thank you to my fabulous guest, Dr. Tracy Shevell, for coming into the Pod Populi studio here in Greenwich. You are amazing.
Thank you so much.
I adore you. And you inspire me every single day. And you helped me through like the hardest time of life. And you guys, you can also watch these episodes on YouTube. I'm a little bit behind in uploading them, but we're like holding hands and like hugging. But anyway, if you liked what you heard today, please go on to Apple Podcasts. Please leave a review, leave some stars. It would be great if you left 5. Put the link to the episode in a text message to somebody that you think could really benefit from it, or even in a text chat, in one of your group chats with like 150 of your closest friends. But
share
anyway,
it on Instagram.
Share it on Instagram. I'm on Instagram posting tons of things. I'll be posting clips, and you can listen to the podcast. And as you know, the show drops every Thursday. So I will look forward to seeing you all back here next Thursday. And in the meantime, like I always say, don't just live your life, love it. See you later.
Thanks.